Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for our main event! Hosted by Eric McMahon, it's Cageside with John Morgan!
Let's go. Welcome everybody to Cageside with John Morgan. I'm your host, Eric McMahon. I am tremendously excited to bring our first ever episode here on grindcitymedia.com. Now, make sure you can watch us on grindcitymedia.com, YouTube, listen to us, Spotify, and or Apple Podcasts. Go ahead, subscribe, leave us a review, and or just give us the like. We always appreciate that. Last week, we recorded our first ever preview episode about the historic night that was UFC 278 and the high kick heard around the world. Go ahead, check out our archives. You can listen to all that. Now, without further ado, I want to bring in the man whose name is on the marquee, widely regarded as the best journalist in all of MMA, AKA the first question guy, AKA the blue polo guy. But as I like to refer to him, as the Woj of MMA. Let's go ahead and bring him in, John Morgan. John, how you doing, brother?
I mean, an intro like that's kind of tough to live up to, man, but I'm doing good, man. Always excited to talk some mixed martial arts, especially somebody as enthusiastic about the sport as you are, man. I mean, we share that common passion for this. So, man, I'm excited to, maybe reach a new audience, maybe help expose the sport to some different people that maybe didn't have that passion before, because I honestly do believe it's the greatest sport on earth.
I happen to agree with you. And, coming off a hot weekend of CFFC, you were on the call. Cage Fighting Fury Championships MMA on Friday night, followed by Cage Fury Grappling that was on Saturday night. Some great action. That main event was, first off, unbelievable. It was Perez versus
Wells.
I mean, that was a great fight. I mean, and we all knew Perez had the chops on the ground. He did not show it till late in the third round, but when he showed it, damn, did he show it.
He's phenomenal, man. Listen, Cage Fury Fight Championships, one of the top kind of developmental organizations in the country. And basically, fighters, they need a place to start out and get high-level experience. And so we put on these events. They're on UFC Fight Pass, part of that network there. But you're right, man. Jose Perez, I mean, both of them, really, credit to Frank Wells. That guy's going to be on the next level at some point as well. But Jose Perez, he's fought 7 times now for CFSC, so we've really gotten a chance to see his game up close. Phenomenal submission game, but he's trying to show people that, look, I can strike as well. I'm not just going to be diving for takedowns every time I go out there. So he put himself in harm's way against Frank Wells, a better striker, to be honest with you, and he kind of survived that storm. But eventually, Frank made a mistake. He kind of slipped on a kick, and it hit the ground, and once Perez got on him, man, the submission skills that he showed were incredible and got the submission. And listen, last time out, Jose Perez at CFFC beat Paul Capaldo, which is a guy that got invited to be on Dana White's Contender Series and didn't get to do it because he got COVID, tested positive the week of the fight. He came back to CFFC. Jose beat him. So I thought, hey, that guy had already been invited to Dana White's Contender Series. Jose beats him. He's got to get that invitation now, right? But he didn't. So instead, he came. He won the interim featherweight title, so he fought first again. I think the invitation to the big show has got to be coming. That guy is talented. Keep an eye on him. And man, it was just such an emotional week for the team as well. A bit of the storyline behind it was just a week and a half earlier, he had lost a training partner, 20 years old, Isaac Watkins, just gone far too soon, a tragic car accident. And that was, of course, weighing heavy on the team, but they all decided, listen, man, we got to move forward. You know what I mean? We got to do this. Let's do this to honor Isaac. And Jose had amazing words afterwards. He said, listen, I was not going to pull out of this fight because this was the last training camp I'll ever have that I spend it with Isaac, and I want to go out there and honor his name. So heavy heart, huge circumstances, amazing fight. It was great. I love it. As much as, we love talking about the UFC and one championship and Bellator and people at the highest level of the sport. There's something fun, too, about seeing these athletes, in the very early beginning of their stages of their career before they make it to the next level that I love watching.
Well, and that CFFC is such an amazing promotion. I mean, one, you have their middleweight champion, Donovan Beard, who literally is being thrown to the hottest prospect to maybe ever grace the octagon. But he's their 185 champion who just came off literally winning the title. And they're like, guess what, kid? Sink or swim.
It's amazing, man. And that's the thing. You're getting tested and you're getting ready to go to the next level. And as you're talking about Nicholl, who looks all the rage, man. People saying maybe one of the greatest prospects of all time. And he looks the part. I mean, incredible collegiate wrestler, amazing record there. But just an overall great athlete as well. Working with American Top Team, which is one of the greatest teams in the world. And just so many great training partners there. But as you said, you get tested. You get these opportunities. You step up. Donovan Beard's doing it. In a couple of weeks on Dana White's Contender Series. We're going to wish him the best luck. It's a tough matchup, but you got to respect it, man. You don't take the chances, you don't get the opportunities.
Absolutely. And we are coming off a very, tragic story with Isaac. And I kind of have like a little personal story. Never met him, but my teammate on CFFC down in Tunica, Mississippi was supposed to fight him. My opponent, my teammate ended up having to pull out morning of because of a lung complication that he got during that. And I know he's taken this tragic this tragic death very, very hardly, because he had great admiration for the kid. The kid only 20 years old coming up, and Trey Manley, he was going to test his wrestling chops against Isaac. And, he was really looking forward to that match. And, unfortunately we're not, Isaac was somebody we were going to see on the scene. I mean, especially training with Perez and that team down at, Gilbert Grappling, who, couldn't be nicer guys too.
Yeah, phenomenal squad. Just a great bunch of guys. A family, you know what I mean? You have some of these teams who, I just mentioned American Top Team, right? Not that they're not great relationships there, but, there's literally hundreds of fighters there. You know what I mean? Some of these smaller teams, their lives are so intertwined together. It's like a family, and they really were. And this hit them all deeply, this tragedy. I mean, 20 years old, you just can't imagine that his entire life in front of him, and looked, as you said, like he was a guy that could be on the scene. So, just gone way too soon and unfortunate. That team is still dealing with it. Obviously, they're still rallying together to move past it. It's not going to happen quickly, but they did have a great result with Jose Perez. And like I said, I hope we see him in the UFC soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, kind of moving on, you guys can go ahead and follow John Morgan on Twitter. It's John Morgan _MMA. And if you want to go ahead and help me build my 125 follower base, I'm E_Mac Life. So let's go ahead and move on. Now, last week on our preview episode, which you can check out in the archives, we kind of chronicled UFC 278 and that high kick heard around the world. But I do want to dive in because, where do we go from here? Where do we go with Leon Edwards? Does he have the ability to call a shot now? Does he have the ability to get that 3-piece Minnesota back if he wants to right now? Or since he's such a new champion coming off of, let's call it what it is, a late Hail Mary come from behind victory, does he have to go into that rematch right away?
Well, listen, I think you said it right. A late Hail Mary, right? Because I've heard a lot of people say, a lucky. It's not lucky. I mean, you saw his team training it. I mean, he threw the hit. To me, there's really no such thing as a lucky knockout unless you got your eyes closed and you just throw something out there. You know what I mean? But this was a strategy. Did it come late? Yes. Did it come in a fight that he was less than a minute away from losing? Yes. But he still did it. He executed it, and it was strategic. But as far as what comes next, I mean, it does seem like everybody's leaning towards the trilogy fight right now. That would be, maybe February, maybe March in London against Kamaru Usman, the third fight. Of course, they had fought 7 years previously, so it's 1-1 right now. And Kamaru Usman had been, on top of the division for quite a long time. I mean, we even asked UFC President Dana White going into it, hey, if Leon wins, has Usman done enough that he would deserve another, an instant rematch? And Dana said, look, I don't usually like to say this stuff, but yeah, he probably would. He's been on top for so long. And then when you add in the fact that he was really dominating the fight, yes, he lost the opening round, but 2, 3, 4, and 5 he was in control of. So, all the circumstances point to it. But it's funny because I've seen some interviews and I've seen some of the things that Kamaru Usman's team has said, because Jorge Masvidal has been saying, look, if there's ever a time for us to fight, it's now. Of course, they had that incident backstage where, as you said, the 3-piece in the soda, the infamous dust up there. And you would think that Leon would want that fight now. At least I think. To me, and this is no disrespect. Well, obviously, it's no disrespect to Jorge Masvidal. It would sell, but to me, it's an easier fight too.
100%. I think it's an easier fight. I mean, stylistically, that is built for Leon Edwards. And that's really where my question comes from. Because if you're a champion picking your fight, like, hey, I got one, twofold. He's not Leon Edwards isn't dodging anybody. So let's be perfectly clear there. But one, do I want to get revenge? Absolutely. And number two, what is stylistically the best matchup for me? And I think everybody is going to say stylistically, that's going to be, Street Jesus.
I I agree. And like I said, when I say easier, I don't want to make it seem as if I'm downplaying the skills of Jorge Masvidal. But as you said, it's stylistically, right? Styles make fights is the old cliche. Jorge Masvidal, a striker. Leon Edwards, a great striker as well. Kamaru Usman, known for his wrestling, his grappling, his control game. So that makes it a tougher matchup. Now, I will say this. I don't think that Leon Edwards has 100% dictation in what happens right now. You know what I mean? I think the UFC and Kamaru Usman have a little bit of say there as well. So I'm not suggesting necessarily that the UFC is just saying, well, Leon, tell us what you want. But if I was advising him, if I was the businessman behind Leon Edwards, I would be saying, hey, let's get this Masvidal matchup now. It's gonna sell pay-per-view wise, as you said. We're champ now. We're gonna be getting points on that. We're gonna be getting a percentage of those sales. Let's get Street Jesus out there selling some pay-per-views for us, and let's face Jorge Masvidal. But listen, I think that Leon Edwards is thinking a little bit different than that. I think he's like, look, you guys said that Kamaru Usman was the pound-for-pound great, the best. I beat him. I want to do it again and show you that it wasn't a fluke, show you that I am capable of beating him, show you that I am that dominant champion. So I don't think it's entirely his decision to make, but it looks like, long story short, what's next is I think the trilogy is going to happen. It looks like it's going to happen in London, February, March, somewhere around there, early part of next year.
So not too much break time for Leon Edwards, but moving on to what, kind of recapping and where do we go next on that co-main event? We know Rockhold, he's going on the shelf. He's going to live his other life. He's got a lot going on outside of MMA, never needed to come back, wanted to come back to prove a point. And I think he did prove that point. But Paulo Costa, he is stuck, as we kind of mentioned last week, in this purgatory state. There's a lot of 85ers on the come up. And, be honest, Costa did not look good against Israel Adesanya. So where does he go from now? Does he fight, kind of like these title eliminator guys, or where are we at with that?
Listen, I think Paulo Costa built back a lot of goodwill that he had lost, right? I mean, as you said, he looked flat against Israel Adesanya back in 2020. Then back in October, he fought against Marvin Vettori, and you had the weird thing where he shows up asking for it to be a higher weight class, and just bizarre, back-to-back bizarre performances, to say the least. Here he comes out, he's engaging in the pre-fight banner. I mean, him and Luke Rockhold kind of became a central part of the storyline ahead of time because they were going back and forth at each other. And then they go on and have a crazy fight, maybe not the most technical fight at all times, maybe not the most pretty fight at all times, but sometimes that's not what it's about. It's just about being exciting and two guys going at it. And they did that. So I think Paulo Costa, who may have, at one point, a lot of people may have written off and said, okay, well, I guess we thought this guy a little too highly of him. Now I think you look at him and you say, okay, wait, no, this guy is an elite middleweight. He's right back in there at the top of the division. As it stands right now, he's number 6 in the UFC's middleweight rankings, and I think that's about right. There's a lot of big fights to happen at 185 pounds. So what I will say is I don't think there's a clear next opponent for him right now. I mean, we've got a lot of big matchups coming up. Of course, we got Robert Whittaker and Marvin Vettori going at it. Of course, we got the title fight with Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira that are going at it as well. I mean, there's a lot of big key matchups coming out middleweight. So I think Paul's going to have to sit back and kind of let those shake out a little bit. But what I do think is important is that he's in those discussions again. Whereas before this performance, I think people were wondering, hey, is this guy done? Does he even want to be a part of this sport? Does he even, what's he doing? Where does he stand? I think he earned back a lot of that goodwill. No clear opponent for me right now, but you got to let these big fights shake out, and he's going to be one of those names that's involved in the next set of big fights that's scheduled.
And you know what? I would just, as a fan, I'd love to see a Sean Strickland matchup at some point. I mean, these two guys just standing. Do you imagine the smack talk that would be going on with that one too?
That'd be great, man. And boy, I tell you what, Paulo's his English is getting better. He's really getting involved in the trash talk, and it's fun. And, I never suggest, hey, if you're a foreign fighter, you have to learn English. No, we understand. It's, your native language is your native language, but it helps. You know what I mean? The North American audience, if you can talk trash in England, look, Jose Aldo doesn't speak much English publicly ever, but he still became a superstar. But, it does help. So it is possible, but it does help, man. When you can talk a little smack, have a little trash, get involved in the press conferences, and you're not waiting for the translator to spit it out there for you, it helps. People get involved in that a little bit more.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Jose Aldo because he was next on my list. He fought on UFC 278. Very lackluster performance. Whether it was just the dominating wrestling and cage grappling that he had to go against, but there was no doubt he was probably the fan favorite on the card. The crowd was absolutely electric for him. And then he comes out and kind of gets overwhelmed, showed no offense, which is, not like a Jose Aldo, which begs the question. And I hate to even ask this, how much more left in the tank does Jose Aldo have? I mean, he's been fighting for 20 years.
It's a good question. It's a fair question. And you're right. First of all, let me just say, it was so cool to see the reception that he got. I mean, for this, Brazilian in Salt Lake City, Utah, to get the entire crowd on their feet when he came in. I mean, it was a standing ovation as he walked in. And it was so cool to see that, the respect that he gets, because Jose Aldo is universally respected on the roster among everybody. Maybe Conor McGregor might not like the guy, but even deep down in his heart, he probably likes him too.
Well,
but
Conor has been putting him over on, in his past couple fights. Conor even put him over, So,
you see?
Hey, listen, everybody turns over a new leaf, and you can't hold down, the affection for the legend that is Jose Aldo.
He is, man. And look, okay, listen, Merab Dvalishvili, first of all, tough opponent. And I think a lot of people don't give Merab the respect that he deserves. It's probably because, his game is based around a lot of grappling and wrestling and control. And typically fans, flock to the people that are out there getting knockouts, right? That's what the casuals especially seem to love. So his style might not be especially appreciated, but it's a tough matchup. Everybody knew it was a tough matchup coming in. I mean, it's a difficult, as we talked about, stylistic matchup for Jose Aldo. But that being said, you touched on it. The output just wasn't there. I mean, it just wasn't there. He was showing phenomenal defensive wrestling. Aldo's defensive wrestling has always been sound, but it was, just phenomenal. But then there was nothing to counter in return. So it does kind of beg you, to ask what's left. I mean, still, it's an incredible thing. The guy's just 35 years old. That's insane. But he came to the UFC at such a young age, the WEC even before that. So he's been doing this for a long time. And bantamweight is full of killers right now, man. The names at 135 pounds, it's just tough to keep up with. I mean, you look at Peter Yan, TJ Dillashaw, Corey Sandhagen, Chito Vera, Rob Font, a ton of them. So, listen, I think Aldo, if he wants to continue fighting, there's going to be a demand for him for sure. As I said, the respect is there for him. The skills are there for him. It's just going to be tough to do it at this elite level. Maybe now it's time to start looking at some potential matchups like a Dominic Cruz, maybe not necessarily making a title run and worrying about rankings, but just putting together some entertaining matchups, put a little bit more money in the bank before you call it a career, because Jose Aldo has absolutely nothing to prove to anyone in terms of where he stands all time.
Oh, absolutely not. And 35 actually kind of blows my mind. I've been watching it. That's insane. But let's go to somebody else who is not, who's actually older and maybe fighting at the top of his game. We got to see him this week in a ONE FC, first ever Amazon Prime show. And coming off a loss, we see Mighty Mouse Demetrious Johnson win in spectacular fashion. Not only did he win in spectacular fashion, but he arguably lost the first 2 rounds, just got smothered under Adriano Moraes, and really couldn't do much. Had a lot of damage from the bottom, mind you, but in that 3rd round, walked him down. Take it from there, John.
Phenomenal finish. I mean, was able to land a big shot, wobble him, and then what was so cool is after he wobbled Moraes, that he kind of tracked him, shift stancing, and threw that flying knee that knocked him cold. Walk-off knockout for Demetrious Johnson. And you said it, impressive performance, man. And Demetrius at 36 years old, you started wondering after he lost to Adrian in their first meeting back in 2021, you said, oh, maybe this is it. Maybe Father Time's finally caught up to him. He's been fighting at a high level for so long. And listen, Rise deserves credit as well. I mean, this is a guy that's been fighting most of his career over in Asia, so kind of gets overlooked sometimes, but definitely one of the best flyweights in the world. So it's not as if this was just some scrub. I mean, it's another top guy fighting out of American top team, and it just seemed like maybe Adriano had his number, or, the size difference between them was going to be too much. But, man, this performance was impressive. I got to watch the fight. The fight unfolded, as you said, on Amazon Prime Video. Pretty cool deal for ONE Championship. It's broadcast in North America, the U.S. and Canada on Amazon Prime. So they get to be in prime time in North America, which I think is going to be huge. A lot of their fights have been at like 5 o'clock in the morning in the United States. And so it's just hard to keep up with that. So I was actually on the call for CFFC, so I didn't get to watch it live, but, came back to my hotel room. It was archived on Amazon Prime right away, pulled it up, beautiful looking stream, looked great. And I just got to say, Demetrious Johnson's performance blew me away, man. This guy is at the top of the game still at this point. And it's so amazing to see what he's doing. I remember before one of his last fights in the UFC, we were in a media day, and I was like, man, you've just been dominating. This was before the Cejudo fight, which he lost. So I was like, man, you've just been dominating. You've done everything. Like, at this point in your career, what do you want to accomplish? And he's like, man, I kind of like to just travel around the world and like collect belts from organizations around the world. And I was like, and I remember laughing and going, well, that's not going to happen. I mean, you're under UFC contract, but okay, that's a nice goal to have. And look, that's what he's doing. He won the Grand Prix belt. Now he's got the flyweight belt. It's pretty cool to see him accomplishing what he wanted to accomplish. And again, to me, looked as good as ever, man. This guy's got plenty in the tank.
Well, he's definitely the flyweight GOAT. I mean, I don't think there's any argument there. But, this is what we do. We talk about fights. We talk about organizations. We talk about, fighters. And it just begs the question, coming off with the longevity of a Demetrious Johnson, does the UFC have to look back right now and say, maybe trading for Ben Askren wasn't the best decision? Now, I will have to say, so I'm going to have to take a step back to go two steps forward. If you don't trade for Ben Askren, you don't get Jorge Masvidal as we know it today. So there's always these even trade-offs, but with just the short lifespan and the injuries that Askren had to overcome, put it on the shelf. He's focusing on his wrestling academies now. And you got Demetrious Johnson looking like he's still in his prime. You said 36. I heard 37. I don't know. He's not young in the tooth. Let's just call it that. Does the UFC have to look back at this point and just be like, hindsight being 2020, maybe we shouldn't have done that?
No, I don't think so. And I think you hit on it exactly why. Now, if you just say Ben Askren for Demetrious Johnson, remember this trade, quote unquote, that happened. Not a literal trade because you can't do that, but basically the organization said, look, I'll let my free agent go to you. You let your free agent come and sign here. And that's what they did. If you look at it straight up one for one, Ben Askren did not pan out in the UFC, right? He had the win over Robbie Lawler, but then he had the loss to Masvidal, the loss to Maia, and that was it. He was out. The loss to Maia actually taking place at a fight night in Singapore, which, so not a massive career to say the least, but you touched on it. You got the birth of Jorge Masvidal, and that was massive. It continues to be massive. I mean, Masvidal is one of the biggest stars in the game right now, despite not necessarily being, having the best career record, so to speak, or being on the longest winning streak or anything like that. So you got a lot of opportunity out of it. So I would say the UFC would be comfortable with it when it comes down to the pay-per-view buys, the dollars and cents that would be generated. Because Demetrius, unfortunately, just wasn't a massive sell for the UFC. He wasn't a big pay-per-view draw. And I think there's a number of reasons for that. The flyweight division was kind of slow to take root. He dominated it for so long that it's kind of like now you look at the women's flyweight division with like Valentina Shevchenko right now. I know that she kind of got tested last time out, but most of the time when she's got a fight, you're not really going, oh, is this the one? And I think that was the problem with Demetrius as well, is he was beating these contenders that were phenomenal, but because he was the first champion, I was having this discussion with somebody the other day. At the time when they were kind of both at the peak in the UFC, a lot of people would argue, is John Jones number one pound for pound, or is Demetrious Johnson number one pound for pound? And some of the arguments for John Jones would be like, look, he's beat 5 former UFC champions. It's like, yeah, well, Demetrius made sure there were no other UFC champions in that division because he dominated the whole time. So there were a number of reasons why he wasn't hugely popular, but I think you have to step back and say, man, to heck with pay-per-view buys and how popular and how many sales he gets. Like, the guy is just damn good, man. He's one of the greatest fighters of all time. There's no question about it.
So do you see any scenario that, maybe a fight or two in, ONE FC and he comes back to reclaim that GOAT status in the UFC? Is there any situation there? I don't know contracts. So like coming into this conversation, I didn't say, oh, he's got 3 fights left on his contract, 2-1. I don't know. But is there a scenario, or is it just like, hey, he's left that behind him. He's going, to your point, and what he said, collecting belts around the world. Is that just what he wants to do now?
I think so. I don't see it happening. Not that it couldn't happen. I mean, you never know. If the UFC comes with some crazy money, which they certainly can, maybe he would. But I kind of get the feeling it's like, look, I did my time in the UFC, and it's a different machine. Don't forget, his coach is part of one championship brass over there as well, Matt Hume. So I think that's comfortable for him. I think they treat him very well. Yeah, the legend there as well. And I think they treat him very well. And I think Demetrius is happier in this organization. And again, another guy that has absolutely nothing to prove. I think the only way that you would want to go back to the UFC is that you want to prove you're the best one. And I think, and this is the way I view the sport, because you touched on there's numerous organizations, there's numerous fighters out there. It's very difficult to be in one of these other organizations other than the UFC and claim that you are the best in the world. The only reason being that you're not necessarily fighting the absolute best competition at all times. You may get a matchup here, a matchup there. You look at, for instance, like Kayla Harrison in the PFL. She's a phenomenal athlete. I think she can compete with anybody in the sport. But a lot of people, when they go to argue her greatness, say, yeah, but look at who she's competing against. Now, the PFL is trying to make a match with Cyborg. They're trying to make a match with Julie Budd. But you're just not getting. But if it's not terribly important to you that everybody calls you the best in the world, and you really just want to support your family and make money, it's prize fighting, right? You want to collect those prizes and stack that paper in the bank for your future. You can do that elsewhere. And I think that's what Demetrious Johnson is doing right now. And he doesn't need to prove to anybody that he's the best in the world. He did that for years and years and years, 11 defenses of his title. I mean, it's unbelievable what he did in the UFC. He's got nothing to prove to anybody. I think he enjoys, being with a different organization that has a different culture, going to these different places, doing these things like this mixed rules bout, I should say, with Rod Tang that he did earlier, just having fun stuff like that.
Well, and Rod Tang, I'm glad you said that. I mean, just a prolific Muay Thai striker, and that knockout he had this weekend, maybe one of the most devastating just front kick it wasn't a front kick, but it hit him in the front of the face, and set up perfect, turning over his hips perfect, and just lights out.
Listen, what one championship has done is pretty cool, right? Because we talk about how our organization's different, right? If you're a competing mixed martial arts organization and you're not trying to be viewed as just UFC light, what do you do to do something different? We touched on the PFL with Kayla Harrison, right? They have a season. They have a completely different thing. You got to have a regular season, and then you qualify for the playoffs, and they treat it like a sports league, Well, what one championship has done is that not only do they have mixed martial arts, but they also have kickboxing and Muay Thai, which, by the way, is done in 4-ounce gloves, which makes it incredibly exciting. They do submission grappling as well, and I love it. So that's their differentiator now, and it's funny. All their press releases and their press notices, they say we're the biggest martial arts organization in the world, not just a mixed martial arts organization, but a martial arts organization. And I love what they've done because you get, moments like this, you get highlights like we saw in these Grand Prix bouts, and it's cool the way it flows. It's all done in the cage. You'll start out with a submission grappling bout, then you'll have an MMA bout, then you'll have a kickboxing bout, and it's cool. To me, I like it because you're getting to see a whole lot of different kinds of martial arts on one card. And the other thing that it does, so we just said, right, if you're not fighting in the UFC as a martial artist, as a mixed martial artist, I should say, it's hard to say that you're the best in the world. But Muay Thai, kickboxing, submission grappling, they're getting all the best in the world and bringing in the one championship. So now you're not seeing, second tier Muay Thai or second tier kickboxing. You're seeing the highest in the sport, as you said, guys that, may have 300 bouts before underneath them before they come here. So great stuff, man. If you haven't checked out the one championship product, especially now that it's available, in North American prime time, at least once a month, it looks like moving forward, definitely do it because it's a great product.
Well, another cool thing, which we saw, Demetrious Johnson do is one round could be grappling, full on MMA. Another round could be strictly Muay Thai. I mean, if you're talking about back in the day, Gracie Challenge, all this dream matchups, you can have this. You can have the highest level striker versus the best MMA guy. Hey, the MMA guy, Demetrius, test your chops. Muay Thai only this round. It's cool. From a fan perspective, it just makes it so fun. And I really do hope it catches on, because to your point, I was having to catch this secondhand, and because I wasn't going to be waking up at 3 or 4 in the morning, especially with the 2 little maniacs I got at home, so I'm really changing diapers at that time, but it was just really, really hard to stay boned up. And now I think, North American audience can really see, hey, there is this amazing talent outside of this continent and outside of the UFC, mainly.
Yeah. And that's it. And like the mixed rules fight, like it's a little bit crazy. Like it's interesting because like I wouldn't want to see that kind of bout in the UFC. Like I feel the UFC is about finding the best mixed martial artists on the planet. It is the top tier, and no disrespect to any of the other MMA promotions, but I believe the UFC is the top tier of mixed martial arts. But that doesn't mean that there's not other promotions out there and other great athletes out there. There are phenomenal athletes, phenomenal fighters in all these promotions. And I like the fact that one championship saying, hey, a mixed rules fight, like you said, we'll do MMA one round and Muay Thai the next. Like, it's bizarre, but it's fun. And if you're doing something different outside of the organization, have a little fun with it, right? Do something a little bit different. You're not going to have is a new league going to compete with the NBA anytime soon? No. But how about Big Three? You know what I mean? Like, okay, let's do something a little different. If we're going to play some ball outside in a different way, let's do something a little bit different. And that's what one championship is embracing. And again, some of these other organizations doing as well. So it's a fun product. And man, by the way, if you haven't watched it either, over the top production. I mean, they do it big, man. It's if you're an old school fan that remembers what Pride was like over in Japan, where it was just built up, massive stages.
The singing lady.
Oh, it's crazy.
Nothing
man.
that beats the singing lady intro. Vanderlele.
The best.
Oh,
the
man,
best.
It's amazing. So, but back to your point of UFC being the premier best mixed martial arts organization in the world, where literally if you're the champ of the UFC, you have right to that claim as the best in the world. Let's look ahead. Historic card, first ever, Paris, France, this coming weekend. And it's a two-headed monster. The way I look at it, everybody gets the billing of the main event, but I want to start at the co-main event. And you have Robert Whittaker, who has been at the top of the division for 5-6 years now, against, Marvin Vettori, who is coming off of a title shot. Then after that loss, he comes up and he just runs into the wrecking machine that we all have known as Paulo Costa. And he wins that fight, setting up this match of Whittaker versus Vettori. Where does the winner go in this match, though? That is what this matchup is a little weird to me, other than I know they're just, hey, they're going to get views and they're going to give us what we want. But from a net step perspective, neither of these guys I can see have a right claim to a championship fight. They have both lost to Israel Adesanya twice.
Yeah, it's a tough spot because and as you said, this is a historic weekend, right, in Paris, France for the first time. That also means that it's on earlier in the day, so we can actually watch during the day and still have a Saturday night to ourselves. But listen, it's a big fight. It's a very, very big fight. But you're right. It's number 1 versus number 2 in the division, but does that necessarily mean that they get a title shot next? Don't know. What's the public demand for that? I mean, they've certainly proven to themselves if they beat everybody else in the division, they'll just stay there. And Israel Adesanya has said along the way, if I need to keep beating these guys because they keep earning their way there, I'll do it. If they're staying busy and they're winning fights and they're getting there, I'll fight them. But again, what's the public appetite for that? I don't know. We're going to see. So I think, step number 1 for Robert Whittaker and Marvin Vettori is win this weekend, which is a tall order for both of them because they are both incredibly talented fighters. Step number 2, I think, is tune in November, Madison Square Garden, and be cheering for Alex Pereira. You know what I mean? And just be hoping that Alex Pereira beats Israel Adesanya because that changed. At that point now, it's free game. I mean, we've seen this happen before. Guys get in a position sometimes where it's like you've lost twice to the champ. Basically, you're just going to have to sit back and wait until that champ loses before you get another opportunity. So if Alex Pereira can beat Israel Adesanya, which, by the way, is very possible. I mean, he did it in kickboxing, and Alex Pereira is on his way up as a mixed martial artist as well. That left hook is unbelievable. I mean, the power that he packs. That's a big fight. I think, unfortunately, the winner of this fight between Whittaker and Vettori is just going to have to sit back and wait to see what happens at Madison Square Garden before they can plot out what happens next because of, as you said, the history of the losses to the reigning champ with Israel Adesanya.
So let's get to the big dog on the card, right? Heavyweight title fight, number 1, or not title fight, excuse me. Heavyweight main event, number 1 in the division versus number 3 in the division. And Cyril Gane is, he's just a well-rounded, great mixed martial artist. Came up short for his title shot. Who thought he was going to get out wrestled in that match versus Francis Ngannou, but he did. And he's going against another one-hitter quitter in Tai Tuivasa. This has fireworks written all over it, but Cyril Gane is probably just going to have to slow this fight down and make an applauding, you're going to have to guess where I'm going to go next type fight, where he didn't have to have that against Francis Ngannou, and then he just got taken out of his game by the wrestling. So where are we looking at on this fight?
That performance was so puzzling to me against Francis Ngannou because I still think Cyril Gane is a very, very talented fighter that I think, if not will hold championship gold, will fight for championship gold again, man. I just think he's that good and he's got that much left in his career. If you look at the betting odds, he is a massive favorite here, and you understand why, right? You talked about in terms of being
-560 last I saw, -560.
It's incredible. You terms of being a well-rounded mixed martial artist. I mean, Cyril Gane is that athletic for a heavyweight, right? Light on his feet, can move well, can do everything. Whereas Tai Tuivasa, the fan favorite, but we know what he's trying to do. Like he's trying to hit, as you said, that one hitter quitter. He's trying to use that knockout power that he has, that otherworldly one-shot power that, heavyweights, sure, they all have power, but Tai can stop anybody. He's a Derek Lewis type figure in that. And then, of course, everybody loves, they love Tai Tuivasa, the shoey, the beer in the shoe, climb the cage, down it. They love him. There you go. Exactly.
He takes random fans in the audience. He tells them, line them up for me on the way back to the locker room.
Dude, it's so crazy when you're in the arena and he wins. The number of shoes that go in the air that are trying to offer up, their shoe for him to drink out of, it's insane. So, listen, for Tai Tuivasa to win would be amazing, I think, for the UFC because he is a superstar, right? He's got this following because he is such a fun guy. He is so entertaining. But, Cyril Gane in his hometown, this is a big moment for him. I think, the loss of Francis Ngannou had to be an eye-opener for him. And I think there was some weird stuff going on there. I mean, you had those guys were former training partners, of course, and their coach Fernando Lopez was kind of involved in some things. I think there was some kind of weird psychological things in that, and it was a big moment for him. I mean, it didn't take him long to get to that opportunity, so I think that things happened very quickly. I think that Ciryl Gane will have learned a lot from his last one, made some adjustments, and I do think he's the more rounded fighter. So to me, the smart pick is Ciryl Gane. That said, I'm not laying down minus 560 on anybody going against Tai Tuivasa who can get one shot, because Ciryl Gane could dominate 23 minutes of the fight and get caught by one shot at the end. To me, I'm not laying 560 on somebody like that. I think it's the right pick. I don't think I'd be putting my money on it.
Well, and I want to bring it back to that Ngannou fight, because I haven't watched that fight since it happened. I never watched a replay of it. I watched it live. But, in those first 2 rounds, he was really dictating the pace. He was really dictating this, the striking battle. And correct me if I'm wrong, did Ciryl try and sit back? Oh, yeah, he did. He sat back for a heel hook in the second round. And now I from what I know, it did hurt Ngannou's knee, but that's where the tide changed. Ngannou said, okay, now I know if I'm on top of this guy, he's not getting up. And that was such just a kind of an error in game planning there. Is that where the fight turned for you as well?
It is. And here's what's interesting is, and I don't mean to be disrespectful in this at all, but a lot of people in that fight, they came away saying, wow, Francis Ngannou's wrestling is way better than we thought it was. And that's probably true to some degree, because I think most people didn't realize he had any wrestling at all, but he's been working on it every day at Extreme Couture and getting better at it. But I kind of walked away with it saying, man, Ciryl Gane's defensive wrestling was terrible. Like what? Like it didn't seem like Ngannou was just like overwhelming, like shooting. Oh my gosh, look at that blast double. Nobody could stop that. It was like, no, you should have been able to stop that. And so I think that, again, whether it was just kind of freezing up, whether it was, as you said, a bizarre tactical error, whatever it was, to me, I thought it was a bad performance of Ciryl Gane, even more so than I want to say like it was just a great performance from Francis Ngannou. So to me, it was a flat night for Ciryl Gane. I don't think he can afford to have that against Tai Tuivasa. But again, this is the debut of the UFC in France. This is where he lives. This is his this is a big night, a big moment, and he would have been working for this. So I think he's going to turn in a better performance. But again, it's a little bit scary because it just takes one for Tai Tuivasa and your night's over.
Over. Okay, so we're getting set to wrap up. I mean, we've packed a lot into this first episode, which I think it's awesome. Make sure you guys check us out, grindcitymedia.com. That's where you can watch and listen to this, or wherever you stream any of your platforms. It's pretty awesome. So, we're wrapping up inaugural show number 1. This is a huge accomplishment that we got off the ground. How long have me and you've been talking about this? 6 months. I've been trying to work on it for a year. I got you involved 6 months ago. I'm just, thank you and hey, shout out Jason Laderfine for putting us together. I mean, that's where this really happened. Who, but everybody else, he's one of the matchmakers for CFFC, that's where our mutual connection comes from. But I want to look forward, just because this is so exciting. We have Fight Night Paris,
right?
Then the next pay-per-view, the one that everybody is just buzzing about, and I don't know, they're buzzing about it for many reasons. So let's just start there. Nate Diaz versus Khamzat Chimaev. If this isn't the most crazy matchup of two people in their career, I don't know I have no idea what to think about it, because conventional wisdom is going to say this wrecking ball Chimaev is going to come up and just run through everybody like he's done, like run through Nate like he's done everybody, minus Gilbert Burns, who he took on this third fight in the UFC. That's insanity, and came out with a decision victory. What do you make of this matchup? Is this something that Nate Diaz really wanted, or is this something that the UFC had said, hey, we love you, you're a thorn in our side, last fight on the contract, let's see what your legacy is really going to be all about?
I mean, listen, that's the thing that everybody says, right? Is it appears Nate Diaz is going to chase free agency after this, and a lot of people saying, what the UFC did here, they just put together this matchup with Khamzat Chimaev to kind of destroy his stock a little bit, and to hand him a loss on the way out the door so that he loses some negotiating power. And maybe there's some of that. I mean, it's not beyond the UFC to do something like that. It's like, well, if he's going, let's make sure we send him out on an L. But listen, I mean, at the end of the day, the UFC is trying to sell pay-per-views. And I think this is a fight that's going to sell pay-per-views because it is intriguing to people. You've got, two guys that call themselves gangsters, you know what I mean? And two guys that believe that and feel that. And Khamzat is this wrecking machine. Khamzat Chimaev looks like the real deal. I mean, that matchup with Gilbert Burns, I heard a lot of people after that, it was interesting too, where a lot of people say, look, Gilbert Burns, test him. He's not the unbeatable wrecking machine that we thought we saw. I'm like, that's what you took out of that?
That is the last thing that I took away from that. I took away as this prospect got thrown to one of the most diverse person in the division, and arguably probably like the toughest, well-rounded guy in the division. And he came out on flying colors, and he got put to the test. He overcame. This is a superstar in the making. That's what I took out of this.
That's what I took out of it as well. I was like, nope, that guy is the real deal. I mean, you run through John Phillips, Reese McKee, Gerald Mearshot, Li Jingliang. Like, all those are impressive. I mean, Li Jingliang and Gerald Mearshot especially, those are a little higher up the division. But you beat Gilbert Burns that early in your career. I mean, that's something special. And you got tested, and you showed your character. And sometimes, to me, that's when you learn the most about a fighter. Like, to me, you learn more about a fighter who has to suffer some adversity in a fight, who has to deal with some things versus just absolutely tearing through people, because you're not going to be able to absolutely tear through everybody every night. And he got pushed to the limit, Khamzat, and yet still found a way to grind out a win. So that was impressive to me. Meanwhile, Nate Diaz, who is just one of the most popular fighters on the planet, has been about keeping it real from day one. I mean, he's about that life at all times. You go back and watch him on The Ultimate Fighter from the very beginning. I mean, he was always willing to throw down. He wasn't putting up with the crap. And he's always been that way. And he's so fun. You look at his loss to Leon Edwards. He's getting pretty much dominated.
He almost Leon Edwards.
He did. He tagged him in the 5th round, and I mean, blood streaming down his face, and he rocks Leon Edwards. And it's so funny because rather than go try to finish the fight, he's kind of more the entertaining guy. He just points at him and laughs, and then the guy's smoking weed at press conferences, and it's just crazy. This is a character. So this fight to me is entertaining. It's not necessarily a fight about who gets to see a title shot next. Now, had Kamaru Usman beat Leon Edwards and had Khamzat Chimaev beat Nate Diaz, then maybe, Khamzat may have already been in a title talk. Now, I think he's got to slow his roll just a little bit because we know the trilogy fight's going to be there. But this would still be a big win for Khamzat Chimaev. But I'm telling you right now, on paper, you may look at this and you may say, it's just an absolute mismatch. I mean, you talk about betting odds. Oh, my goodness. The line on Khamzat Chimaev is insane. And look, Khamzat Chimaev, let's be honest, should win the fight. He's a guy that is young, in his prime, looks on the way up, looks to be every part of title contender right now. But Nate Diaz is that guy that's not going away. So these are questions that we haven't seen yet. Okay, we saw Khamzat tested in a 3-round fight. What happens when we see him get tested in a 5-round fight? Because Nate Diaz ain't going away. You are going to have to beat him. As he said, you're going to have to kill me for me to stop in there because I'm going to continue going. So what if all of a sudden at round number 4, Khamzat's labored breathing and he's having a little trouble and he can't go? Nate's still going to be there stringing together punches. So this will certainly be an intriguing fight. And I think the week of the fight, even if you look at it on paper now and say, I don't care about that. Trust me, when the promo packages start rolling out, when the interviews start getting done, when Nate and Khamzat are face-to-face at the press conference and then at the ceremonial weigh-ins and they're up in each other's face, mean mugging each other and the whole you're going to want to see the fight. So I think it's one that people care about. And, we'll talk about obviously as we get closer, but it's very much, I believe, going to be just a tale of kind of 2 fights. Is how do you handle the early rounds versus the later rounds? Can Nate survive that early onslaught? Because that early onslaught is coming. And if he does, will Khamzat Chimaev still be around in the later rounds to continue to do what he did early on?
Well, in all honesty, that's where Gilbert Burns looked to start taking over the fight, where is in that mid-second round to 3rd round. Chimaev then, showed a lot of resolve. He had opportunities to quit in that fight and he just didn't. That's going to be amazing. And I just need to say this because it happened this week. When you're talking about keeping it real, Nate Diaz keeps it real, even live streaming. USADA coming into his place as he's smoking, whether it's weed or if it's one of the the weed substitutes.
No,
who knows?
No, it's weed. It's weed.
It's weed. He is smoking weed while USADA is there trying to test him, and they're trying to cover the camera. They're like, "You can't do this." And he don't give a damn. And if that guy's going to keep it real, who knows? I was half expecting a Stockton slap in that video.
That's why fans love him, man. You know what you're going to get. He's going to be that way. He's going to be that guy till the end, man. He's one of a kind.
All right, well, wrapping up here. First ever episode of Cageside with John Morgan. Next week, coming at you, we are going to recap everything that happened UFC Paris, plus any late breaking scoops that in the world of MMA. Again, you can watch this on any of your platforms, particularly go to grindcitymedia.com. You want to see these two pretty faces, youtube.com, listen on Spotify or Apple Podcast. For Eric McMahon, the Woj of MMA, John Morgan, we will see you next time.